Carl Jung and Freud are some of the founding fathers of psychology. And I want to talk a little bit about how they viewed the mind so that we can extract some kind of eternal truth or understanding of how the mind works. And so for both of them, the mind could be split into the known and the unknown, or the conscious and the unconscious. And the known mind, or the conscious mind, is that part of your mind which is aware of things, that can see things, that everything that's visible. The unconscious mind is the things that are invisible to you. For example, maybe a fear, maybe trying to understand that fear. And if you have trouble understanding a fear, well, that's the unconscious mind. Now, if you conquered a fear, that would be part of your conscious mind. So the knowledge is available to you. It's accessible. It's understandable. You've got a grasp on it. You possess it. And what's in the unconscious is not possessed, but it's a part of you. And so with Freud and Carl Jung, if you could connect like a communication channel between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, well, then you're on the path to the self. And the self is that connection, that understanding. So if you're trying to suppress something and not face it and not understand it and not make it part of you, well, then in some sense it's stagnating, or it is not communicating with you in a way that can improve your life. And so, but with Freud, you get more of a biological view of the mind, that the mind is made of instincts. It's made of biological urges. But I want to focus a little bit more on on Carl Jung's idea of the way the mind works. And he saw the mind as this symbolic entity. It consists of multiple personalities. You could think of this as, if we do a little thought experiment, imagine two of your friends. Okay, now each of those friends has a voice. And if you hear that voice, you have some sense of knowing what they might say or what they might think about something. And that voice becomes a personality inside of your mind. And so this is part of the way Carl Jung viewed the mind, is that it is a complex of personalities. It's a complex of voices, and all these voices become internalized. Now, if you could integrate all of these different personalities into one single personality, that's what he calls his process of individuation, and that is to become a self, or a individual, or basically to become yourself. But there's also another aspect to the way Carl Jung views the mind, and that's from a mythological perspective. And although he saw himself as a hardcore scientist, he was often dismissed in the in communities of psychological research, scholarly particularly, and that's because mythological descriptions don't categorize the world into scientific binaries of true and false. With the scientific account of the world, things are true or they're false. They are testable, or when you discover a truth, it's testable, it's repeatable, there's a hypothesis, and the hypothesis matches the results. But with viewing the mind from a more symbolic, mythological way, with Carl Jung, it's a much different way of seeing the way the mind works. So it's not just something that's biological. It's not just the mind is consisting of the urge to eat or the urge to sleep, to rest, to heal. It's not just something that can be biologically categorized. The mind can be symbolically categorized as having a mythological core. And that core is made of narrative. And so that means that the mind is made of stories. And those stories are like the individual personalities of the people that we know. And as we get to know a good friend, we know their story. And their stories become part of the narrative content of our minds. And it helps to shape our worldview. And so for Carl Jung, the mind is mostly narrative. It's not just biological, but Carl Jung would also probably agree that it has a biological structure as well as a symbolic structure. So if we were to give more of an example to the symbolic structure with Carl Jung, we might take the story of Noah and the flood in the Christian context. We could say that that story is an analogy for preparing for chaos. And that has psychological survival value for us. So we don't ask, is the story of Noah and the flood true or false? We say, what kind of psychological relevance and truth does it have that we could import and turn to wisdom and lead us to lead better lives? Well, for one, if we take that story, Noah prepared for the flood. He got all the animals onto the boat. Not sure how he did that, but he did it. But it doesn't matter if it's true or false that it actually happened. We can take out the eternal truth from the story and we can say, when chaos is coming, we need to prepare for it. If it's financial, maybe we need to plan our finances. If it's getting out of a relationship, let's just say, for instance, the whole metaphor of Noah and the flood is a metaphor for us getting out of one relationship. And let's say we were really deeply in love with that person. Well, the fact is, we have to face the reality that we're no longer with that person. And so we're going to have to continue to lead our life or to live our lives. How do we do that? Well, from the story, the chaos is going to come. The flood's going to come. The tears are going to come. But there's going to be a process of renewal. There's going to be a process of rediscovery. And so the water becomes this like mythological motif for maturation and growth, as well as chaos and surviving chaos. And so Noah survives the chaos. We survive the flood. The tears come, but then there's the growth of finding someone who's more compatible with us, someone who connects with us more. So this is a little bit of how, kind of losing my voice just a little bit here, but it's because I'm so excited to share this ideas with you. But Carl Jung views the mind from more of this psychological, mythological perspective. The mythological and the psychological are one and the same for Carl Jung. Freud shares the belief with Carl Jung that the mind consists of the known and the unknown, the conscious and the unconscious, but he kind of differs, viewing the mind a little bit more biologically. But interestingly enough, Freud actually pulled a lot of his theories from literature. And I think that's a beautiful thing, because literature is narrative, and narrative is part of the structure of the mind. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope to share more of psychoanalytical thought regarding the ways that the mind works.